What's up, my man?
Hey, buddy.
Sorry I was a little bit late there. I was charging my mouse.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay. Is that code for something?
No, it's real stuff, man. You gotta, your mouse will die. Now you gotta USB it in, and it's getting all kind of crazy out there.
Man, I'm sorry to hear that, man.
I know that's not really that newfangled, but it's been happening a lot. I don't know if I might need a new mouse soon. Now that is code.
Yeah, for time to step up your game.
Time to step up my game. Hey, it's a big day in the C26 triathlon world.
Is it?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, we have launched our Patreon page.
Finally.
Yes, we've had a lot of people emailing us about, how can we support the podcast and everything like that. So, after about 2 months of kicking that around, and 63 podcasts into the game, we decided to launch it. And
hey, better late than never.
There you go. There's 60. The podcast is going to always be free, but we're putting up this Patreon. If you don't know what that is, Patreon's basically like a Kickstarter kind of crowdsourcing deal that where people can kind of support us on a monthly basis. Sort of like, hey, man, we think listening to all these podcasts is worth $3 a month and a cup of coffee or whatever, and we'll just kind of put it out there and let you guys build up a little money to kind of get equipment and do a bunch of stuff. We're putting a ton of time into this, which, like I said, we probably keep doing anyway, but it does help us take it to the next level, and we're off to a good start, and we would appreciate anything that you guys can do, anything you can afford. There's opportunities to donate from $1 to, well, 100 and anywhere in between or more, but it really does kind of give us a backbone sort of to kind of build all these ideas that we've been talking about, right?
Oh, man, it's and honestly, like, if you honestly can only give $1, but you're afraid to because it looks so little, please, we're first of all, we're just incredibly grateful for everybody who's supported us so far and already, and thankful. And literally, when they say anything helps, anything helps.
Yeah.
And it does, like Mike said, helps us with hosting fees and equipment, and there is a lot of additional things we want to do as just kind of a branch off from this cast. I think somebody said it earlier that it was kind of, this is more of what we hope is more of a movement than anything, and this allows us to reach more people and to offer more casts per week. And like Mike just said, yes, it's the podcast is going to be free, and we just would be incredibly grateful and appreciative if you could help us continue to do it and be comfortable doing it, doing more of it, because it's what we love to do, and we love to offer this to our listeners, and it's been great so far. I know that no matter what, it'll continue to be great.
Yeah, for sure. We get so much out of it, and we thank you for that. I just want to reiterate that don't worry about the small. I mean, it's more about what you really honestly can put forth. If that's a few bucks a month, then, we like, I want it to be more about that than, trying to overstep your bounds. It's kind of like our philosophy on training, stay on your horse,
Yeah.
And stay on it and keep going. And, it doesn't have to be forever unless you think it, you want to keep doing it, it's like one of those deals. So it's out there. It's you can find it on, if you go to Patreon, is it patreon.com/crushing iron, or you could probably just search Patreon space crushing iron on Google and you'll find it too. And we'll have links everywhere. Actually, if you go to crushingiron.com, there's a it's up there on the top right corner now. You can just click on that and go straight to it. So
at least watch the video.
I mean,
I hate being on videos or in videos, and I'm trying to get better at it. So at least if you want to see me be really uncomfortable, you got 2 minutes and some change of just seeing me be uncomfortable. I had a text from Kate, part of the Spanish Armada, and she's like, "Yeah, it's so weird to see your face and your mouth move, and then your podcast voice come out." I was like, "Yeah, I mean, what do you expect?
Well,
what other voice am I gonna have?" Well,
yeah.
We can get new equipment, and my voice will sound even better.
I mean, I gotta be honest. I mean, yeah, we're gonna have more videos with us on them and everything. But I mean, I gotta admit, it's kind of a little awkward asking for money, and as much as I feel like it shouldn't be maybe, but so we probably weren't like totally on our game or anything like that. But we're gonna be on our game. It's just that I don't know. That's just kind of new for us, and we had to set it up, and they kind of tell you to make it a little bit informal and just show kind of how you are, and we definitely did that. Kind of everyday Joes just hanging out on the porch.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, if anything, you're supporting the sustainability of the podcast and doing it more often. It's just really as simple as that.
Okay, so we're going to get to the Power Meters Part 2 real quickly. But first, I just want to give a shout out to the people who have helped kind of spearhead and jumpstart this in our closed Facebook group through Patreon. We've got Eric Yabush, my buddy from college. Nice job, Eric. Dave Mercer, Erica Jerkowski, Stuart Wood, Lisa Bruce, Ross Kaffenberger, Trisha Owsley, Stuart Rogers, Ann Terali, and the Spanish Armada. Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to giving everybody a thank you and shouting out to everybody as we go. But are you ready to start with some power meter action?
Oh, heck
buddy?
yeah, man! I'm ready. I've been waiting, and we've kind of been flirting around the topic on the closed group. So yeah, man, I'm ready to rock and roll.
All right, man. Why don't you kind of go into a little bit of what we covered in Power Meters Part 1 and just a little quick review, and then we'll get into like smart practices for training, when and how you should even test. How close to the race you should test to do, and you've trained and you've raced with power. Now what?
Yeah, now what isn't one I can't wait to get to.
Now what? I'm excited.
Yeah,
now
now
what?
what? No, but so the first cast we got a lot of good feedback on it, and I do really. I mean, as much as I enjoy doing all of our podcasts, to be honest with you, but we do tend to go back and forth from like super technical, in depth training wise, and then just more stuff like our last episode. But I really love going into these podcasts like the Power one, because these things are super important, and a lot of people, for whatever reason, a lot of people have power meters or thinking about getting them and just really have no clue like why, what, or what they do. So last episode, what we touched on quickly was, not when, but the parameters in which you should consider actually doing a power test, what that test should look like, what a warm-up can look like, and then what the duration of the test should look like, and then how you should appropriately set zones. We also talked about the difference between average power and normalized power. Average power being your actual average power for the whole ride. Normalized power, also known as NP, also representing what I think is actually a little more important aspect of your kind of when you want to put in your data fields for the Garmin, is that NP. And that's what, because you do have, coasting and downhills and then huge spikes going up hills, or if you choose to get out of the saddle, you'll have those. It kind of tells you what your body felt like you held for a sustained time. So I just think that's more representative of the fatigue your body is feeling versus just the average power. And then we covered, how to ride up hills, when you should get out of your saddle, which is almost never, and how to ride on flats. So I feel like that set people up in, pretty good for, hey, I have a power meter. I probably know what fields to use, in terms of, looking at my Garmin or whatever, and what's important and what do these things mean, but, knowing what they mean is one thing. Knowing how to, apply them to A, your training, and B, your racing is when things can really start to click, and you can really start to see some progress.
Yeah. I'd like to say, I don't race with power, just as a informational piece for everybody. And I found episode number 60, the purpose of riding with power. Very interesting. There's a lot more in there than just, I think, power meters, good bike riding strategies, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it was only like 4 episodes ago, so if you just kind of go back, and if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend listening to that, because it's good stuff all the way around. It'll help understand this one a little bit better.
Yeah. So so what I really want to talk about, first off is once you got your number, and for conversation's sake, and for my warped out brain at this point in the day, like, we're just going to say for the remaining of the podcast that 200 is your given functional threshold. In the previous podcast, we discussed a lot about, what general percentages of that you should use to take forward when you do specific events based on the length of them. And so now, what about training? So I've got these numbers, and I think I kind of know what they mean. How should I apply them? How should I, adapt my zones? How should I, and not just how should I adapt and customize my zones, but more importantly, how exactly should I distribute them? And there's a gentleman earlier on our closed group who was talking about trainer road and the quote unquote sweet spot, training, and I will, I'll tell you what I kind of told this guy, was that, everybody that I know pretty much uses this sweet spot training. And a lot of their stuff, they just don't call it sweet spot. For a lot of people, it's just called, zone 4, high zone 3, and really low lactate threshold. So the kind of the gold standard, I would say, and what most people use based on percentages, or what you would call your Coggin power zones. And what the Coggin power zones are is they were defined by who a lot of people would argue is the godfather of power, of
Corey
power
Coggin?
meters. Corey Coggin. Yes, CC. We the cat's out of the bag. He is retired. He is just going to live off his perpetuity and interest. And so anyway,
and why I choose to bet him on races?
Yeah, I don't have any idea. So this is Andrew Coggin. He actually invented a lot of the or had a lot of input in the software they use within Training Peaks to establish like your TSS, your training stress score, your intensity factor, all these kind of things. And he also basically designed the WKO Plus, WKO4 or WK40 Plus, whatever it is, for Training Peaks, which is just a power software. And his zones are defined as active recovery is going to be 55% of your max power or less. So
Okay.
so I'm going to guesstimate 55% of 200 is around like the 110, 115 mark. Your endurance training, according to Coggin, which is zone 2, should be 56 to 75% of your max power. So your endurance is that all-day training pace, your classic like long LSD, long slow distance. That's your zone 2. I would call it endurance, and that is the bottom floor is 56%, and the ceiling of that zone is 75% of your functional threshold power. Now, where things can get very subjective between who you want to listen to, who you don't want to listen to, is where we get into that zone 3, which is what I often refer to as the gray zone. Okay. And the bottom for that's going to be 76%, and the ceiling is going to be 90. This is that level that we talk about a lot, to where it's like that race pace a little above feel, where you feel like you can do it a ton and you love going that fast and you have the fitness to do it, but you can do it for so long that the fatigue factor is huge back-to-back days. And so that's 76 to 90% is what you call your tempo. Now, where a lot of the magic happens is what I would call in zone 4, which is your lactate threshold. For Coggin, that's your bottom, your basement is 91%, all the way up to 105%. caveat is that 105% of your functional threshold power probably won't be achievable during your initial phases of like the effort, just because you're opening up, and especially if you're going by heart rate, there's always that lag. And like if I asked you to go like for a 30 seconds and get to zone 5, it would be very, very, very difficult. You know what I mean? Because
zone
you're
5 or 4.
I'm just zone 5 or anything like even zone 4, like going like 100 and 105%. It's going to be really difficult to get up to that heart rate or that power sometimes and hold it because of how short the interval is. And then zone 5, which you spend very little time in for the majority of the year, is 106 to 120%. And now we're talking like intensities of really no longer than like 3 to 8 minutes. And that'll just basically increase your VO2 max. So having said that, now that you have your base for your zones, now you want to talk about how you distribute them within your training. Obviously active recovery is pretty self-explanatory. That can be after a hard run, on an easy recovery day. Endurance is basically your, hey, today's a long ride, hop out, get in the saddle, zone 1, zone 2. It's your, what people would call like their Ironman training, your long saddle days. Tempo efforts, not a huge fan of during like for the majority of the season in short bursts, but you will get into that later on when you get towards doing some race pace efforts, strictly because that's where you're starting to flirt with your race power. Because, we talked about before, 75% all the way up to 85% of your functional threshold power is where that kind of is where you kind of hit that your Ironman percentage and your half Ironman percentage. Do you recall that from our previous podcast?
Yeah, I do actually.
So that's that race pace that people love to train in all year long. But that gray zone, as I like to call it, is where the return on investment is really not worth the fatigue that you incur from doing it. Now, we love to be there because we can hold it for a long time. We can go out and do it for sometimes 2 hours and have like a really great, braggable, miles per hour or even a run pace, just talking about just generally. But the fitness you gain from it versus the fatigue and the soreness and the days off required after it are negligible, and I would say sometimes detrimental, versus moving up to your lactate threshold where you can do these for sometimes up to 20 minutes, you would hope, sometimes as low as, we're going to go like maybe low of 10 to max of 30, but you can't do them that many. You can't do that many days consecutive of that. But so you can recover and come back sometimes the next day and do it again, but you can't do it for so long because it is so hard. And that's where you really start to see those huge benefits. And that's where this gentleman in the forum was talking about sweet spot from the percentage standpoint. We're basically talking zone 4 for all intents purposes.
All right, so I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're talking about that 200 number, that threshold. If you're doing a 20-minute tempo sections, for example, and then with recovery in between, would you do multiples? Because
of what zone?
4.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Generally, and I might try and link these to the show notes, but Steven Seiler has like a really great graph on like these, almost like what they call these sweet spot interval lengths. We're talking like 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 based on what zone you're in. I wish I had pulled it up. I don't have it on me this very second, but basically zone 4 is one of those equal to or greater intervals, is where you get a whole lot of benefit. So if you do like a 6-minute lactate threshold interval, then by all means give yourself 5 to 6 minutes recovery. So you're looking at equal parts effort, equal parts rest. And you can find that you can probably get in, 5. So let's say you're starting out with 5 6-minute intervals with 6-minute rest. Now, once you start building through the year, your goal needs to be, now I can go 3 10-minute intervals with maybe a little bit less than 10 minutes rest, maybe 8 minutes rest, up to 2 15-minute intervals, or maybe even 2 20-minute intervals with minimal rest going out through the course of the year. So and what a lot of people do is they really focus on these super long intervals first, but you need to look progression, and you need to look for how your body is adapting, and don't try to get ahead of itself, because that helps lead. If you do try to get ahead of yourself, it helps lead to burnout and overtraining, and just basically you're doing a really, really good job of accumulating stress. And you're not taking enough time to allow your body to learn how to dissipate that fatigue and stress, which is also one of the most equally important skills your body needs to learn how to do, is to go these really, really hard, sustainable efforts and then teach itself to recover in a very, very quick, short span of time. I mean, and then that's a pretty easy. You kind of walked me right into that one. An easy progression to go to is, all right, I'm starting out with, because you just want to look at chunks. Okay, so I'm saying, let's say you're going on my workout for the day is 2 hours. And a lot of times I'll throw this in my athletes' workout, like, okay, go use 3 hours for example. Let's go right 3 hours, and at some point during those 3 hours, I want you to insert 5 8-minute intervals at zone 4, or this specific, or your power, or this specific heart rate with this much rest. And so again, what that needs to eventually move to is, instead of like 5-8, which is 40 minutes of really, really, really hard work, it needs to work its way down to 4 10s, 4 10-minute intervals. And then it needs to work itself down again to maybe, say 3 12 or 3 13-minute intervals, and then just work your way down to where you're doing less intervals, more time, and then incorporating less rest in between. And that's when you start to really see some huge benefit on your training and your power, because this is something that Todd Nordmeyer and I have talked about or we talk frequently about. He's a guy here local in Nashville, a guy that I really like and respect a lot. And he does my power test if I ever go to his facility. He has one of those indoor cycling facilities, and we always talk about, you could have an athlete that may go in there who's not training for Ironman or 70.3 distance. They're training for sprint and Olympic distance racing, because that type of training is totally different. All right, so Mike, so let's say for argument's sake, you're just training for sprint and Olympic distance triathlon.
Okay.
I'm training for half and fulls. You and I both go in, take a test. We're the same height. We're the same weight. We go in there and you crush, like a 300 watts is your FTP test, and mine's 280. Well, what Todd and I always talk about is that yes, were you stronger than me? Absolutely. Did you crush me for that 20 minutes? Absolutely. Now, does it make you a better, stronger cyclist? Not really. Because what I bet I can do is only rest for about 5 more minutes, hop on, and probably do that 280 again. Because what you need to do if you're training appropriately is to recover and continue to do these long, hard efforts for long periods of time, because that's what I'm training to do in these 2.5 hour, 3 hour rides, 4 hour rides, where I'm interspersing these hard intervals in between as you're teaching your body recovery, adapt, freshen up, get back to work, instead of all out fatigue at 300 watts. Now I need that, and that's all I've got, because you don't have both of those tanks. That's kind of when you merge, you're merging your gas tanks. One is short course, one is long course. The long course is a little bit bigger with maybe a little bit lighter octane. The smaller tank is the one you'd be using at like a sprint and Olympic, but it's super high octane, but you use it fast. Mm-hmm. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because I had this discussion with them a few years back. He's like, man, I was like, that guy crushed his power. I mean, it's like something insane. He was like, yeah, but if I asked him to do it again, he wouldn't be able to even do it come close for the rest of the day. Versus you could probably get back on and take 10 minutes rest and do it again.
I mean, it's a little bit like milers versus quarter milers or something, right?
Right, exactly. That's a great analogy. Yeah. So I mean, there is that, like, there's such a difference in fitness and such a difference in training based on the distance you're doing, based on your goal. I mean, there are so many things that need to be like just totally analyzed and then planned well. And then one of the things that I'll kind of get out of the training phase of it is something that a lot of athletes really don't. They know what, like, your normalized power is, which is great. They know what your EF, your efficiency factor is. So that's great. What they don't normally look at is your power. So there's a field, if you click analyze on Training Peaks, and we talked about this before when I talked about running, but it's a PW semicolon HR, and obviously it's power semicolon HR, and then it gives you a percentage. And what that is it's called what they call decoupling, and what it's basically telling you is the difference between your heart rate and your power, and it's either decline or increase over a duration of an event. So let's say a perfect, robotic individual would go out and they would hold 200 watts for 3 hours during the race, and their heart rate would stay basically the exact same the whole time. That'd be like 0%. But what you often see is for people who have only focused on short stuff and lots of power, but none of the build portion and endurance portion, the strength portion, which is often overlooked because it happens during the base period, is what you see is later on in a race, two things happen. Your either heart rate has to rise a ton to be able to hold that sustained power, or your power drops and your heart rate stays the same or even increases a little bit or decreases. That's what you don't want, obviously. You want the same heart rate response to the same power effort. And so those are numbers that people should look at, even in their training, to see how they're progressing. And if you can keep it between 1 to 5% is pretty good. If you can keep it in there, that's actually pretty stellar. But
so is that the goal, the robotic ride? I mean,
for sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's not going to be. You're probably never going to see like a 0.0 unless you have like perfectly like no wind, perfectly cool, like no other like perfect race conditions. You're going to probably even see like a 1 or 2, but yeah, you want to see that even. It's the same thing I brought up in the previous podcast about power was you want your average power and your normalized power to be super close. Within 5 to 10 is usually, where you're looking at to be pretty good as far as your average, your normalized power. That's when you really paced it well, because you didn't have any huge spikes and you didn't have any huge, coasting time. So same thing can be said for this when you talk about decoupling and your heart rate and power is what you don't want to see is huge heart rate getting higher and higher as your power stays the same or even drops, because then that you just really neglected the strength phase and the endurance phase in order to hold your sustained effort for a long period of time.
Quick question, just because I'm curious, because right on this line is like, okay, you think about Kona and you watch these pros and stuff like that, and sometimes you see them surge. They see an opportunity and they'll surge, and obviously that's going to throw things out of whack, right? But these guys and girls are just in that kind of level of shape that they can afford to toy around with that kind of game, or
they don't have a choice.
Okay.
I mean, the pro race is totally it's like a totally different sport than what we go through as age groupers. I mean, they have to be able to respond to insane levels. It's like most age groupers think, all right, I want to finish strong and raise my power. Sure, you want to do that as a pro, but if you look at most pros, they have to be, in order to stay with the group that they need to stay with, in order to give the benefit for that, quote unquote free draft at 10 or 12, 20 meters, whatever the race is, they have to just have an insane amount of power at the front end. just to be able to keep up. And then they have to be able to not be so fatigued and so just body like stressed that they need to be able to still hold a really high power for the rest of it. So their race is totally different.
Well, that becomes the strategy, right? Is they try to burn out runners.
Oh yeah, they
and
try.
Things like
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then, but it's still a good lesson because what they train a lot is they train a lot with hammering out specific sessions, and then just finish. It's so funny because so many athletes that I've come across really struggle with the like no structure towards the end of their ride. Like if the first hour to hour and a half is structured and hard intervals and the rest of it is now, and finish off the 2 hours just ride zone 1, zone 2. And like, oh, I can't do that, or I don't know what to do. I'm like, dude, that's what you're training your body to go to do, these hard efforts and to be able to dissipate that fatigue and stress quicker and more not beneficial, more efficient. So you're not so fatigued later and you're thinking, oh man, I remember on mile 6 that I'm still feeling that one. You want to be like, oh dude, I was able to get up, crush it, and then now I'm still just cruising. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next.
Is this when to test, and should you even test?
Yeah, we can do that one. When to test. In the off-season, well, first of all, if you're going to test, commit to testing year-round. Because a lot of people will test like 1 or 2 times at the beginning of the year, and then they'll never test again. So your tests were kind of useless. And everybody sees huge jumps in their first test. Most people that I talk to, if you start January through March, you're maybe doing every 8 weeks because you're seeing huge gains. After that, maybe March getting towards end of June, beginning of July, maybe every 12 weeks. And then after that, you're pretty much in race season. So you should more than likely just be getting your data from your races. And at a certain point, when I discuss should you even test, there are a ton of top level pro coaches who don't even waste their time with testing. Absolutely. They don't believe in it. Not that they don't believe in it. They just think that your body's internal calibration of perceived exertion and then how you felt afterwards is the best indicator, which I agree with.
So you're working them into workouts, basically, sort of semi-testing.
Yeah, that's what you do. You and then what you can look at is all right. Well, you've shown you can hold this for longer. Now, why not go here? Or a good way is if you're doing these same workouts, and your decoupling gets lower and lower and lower because you're nailing it, it's time to up the ante. So in training, it's okay to have, poor decoupling over 5% because it means you were so winded, you were working so hard. But if you continue to look at it and you track it and it goes from 7%, 6%, 5, 5, 5, 4, 3, then you have a couple weeks at 2%, of like very little difference, and your body is basically saying, gotcha. Like, I totally see what you're doing. I've adapted. I've changed. So if you want to like stress me, which that's what training is, stress, rest, repeat. And so if you don't find a new way to stress it, then you're going to really start to see these stagnant numbers that a lot of athletes tend to start seeing, where your FTP might be 250, and then 8 weeks later it's only like 252 or 253. And so those are other things you need to be aware of. But again, always listen to yourself and look at the numbers. Don't just do the intervals. And that's what a lot of people do. They just do the intervals. They don't look at their numbers and what they mean, how they got there, and what the data is actually telling them.
Yeah, that seems like it's the whole crux of it, right?
It is. It is the most, confusing tool for a lot of triathletes that I know.
Yeah. It confuses me, but I see what that means. It's like since I don't use a power meter, but I kind of internalize those concepts when I'm, out there winging it.
Yeah,
Sort of
when
thing.
you're just winging it.
Yeah, I'll have to show you some of my internal calibration power meter workouts from the last training session.
Oh man, I would love to see those. Because it's fun. It's funny how we this is often like a different subject, but I had a listener email me and it was like, "Hey, so my goal pace," and I used to do this all the time when I just first got in the sport. It was like, all right, so my goal pace for my race is 7:30, or to average 7:35s. Should my slow pace be in the 9s? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea where you even got the number 7:35. Like, where did you even come up with 7:35? Because the chances that you actually nailed your potential perfectly down to the second are like 0. So basically, like we talk about all the time, you're either going to overshoot it or undershoot it. And that's why it's always so important to just listen to your body and listen to your gut and go fast or go hard, depending on how you feel, because you're always, always, always going to do one of two things. You're going to be smart enough to take it easy when you need to, or you're going to surprise the hell out of yourself and be so much more faster and fitter and stronger just by not being a slave to a preconceived number that you basically equate to your triathlon relevance.
Yeah, that is a danger. That's a danger zone. Like you always told me, when I have those preconceived numbers, I mentally go there whether I feel better than that or not.
Right.
So sometimes it can slow you down.
It's common.
Very common in my workouts. But all right, so should we go on to you've trained, you've raced with power, now what?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I just kind of touched on that.
Right.
You've trained, you've raced, and now what is it time to do? Well, now it's time to sift through. If every athlete took the same amount of time they did to write their post-race blog or analysis on diving into their data and seeing what it actually meant, then they would be like 10 times the athlete that they probably are right now. From a planning standpoint, and I know that's hard and it's time consuming, and some people just don't like to do it, and I get that. I like to do it. I like sifting through the data. I like figuring out what works. I like questioning things, and sometimes, and when the hardest thing or hardest decision comes is to think, oh, well, could I have done it better? Maybe I'll do this. And more often not, it's like the biggest mistake. Like the more, most of the time, if you find something that works really well, stick with it until it doesn't. Because you're always gonna continue to get better instead of always searching for that new, faster, more popular hack or whatever it is that's become the new rage. And just stick with what works, and don't get distracted by all the noise. And you're gonna find that you're gonna do a lot better.
Yeah,
that's it.
I believe
that's all
it.
I got, man.
That's all you got.
That's all I got.
So, what if I don't have power meter? Is it just best to ride a lot of hills?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yep. Hard up, recover down, repeat.
Yeah.
They used to break world records and shatter Ironman records at Kona with a chrono. So it's got they're tools and they are beneficial to a point, but nothing replaces consistency and hard work.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've always looked at it, and I just have never given it the full-on effort, I guess. Yeah. So it's just about I got to get my ass out there and train harder, really. But because I do, I think this is, a little bit relevant. I think I do have a pretty good feel for my body and my legs, and I think I've kind of shown that a little bit throughout my career. But as I work over in this flat lab and I think that actually, because of the wind, is pretty good. I mean, it's not hilly. Of course, it's super flat, but I tend to like do my tempo sections or whatever, and I base it on miles per hour, and that's like to me is an effort thing. But it's I'll do like 3 laps, which will take me 10 minutes or whatever, and then I'll recover for 3 laps, and I'll just kind of increase the miles per hour. And to me, it sort of works in a way. It's kind of, obviously it's not going to be super accurate, but
Yeah.
it's, the course is the same. I know exactly what's going on, and I just know if I push that effort, I'm going to go faster. It's the same, layout. So
Exactly.
that's kind of how I do it a lot of times. But I just know that I didn't run a lot of hills this time either. And that's like,
Hey,
as we
lesson
said.
learned.
I
Well,
know.
not really. It's only a lesson if you actually learn it.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about on one of our previous podcasts, recent podcasts, the hills are king, basically. So
They are your friend.
go up hard, take it easy down them.
That's it, man.
Unless you're afraid of them and you have to work on your speed.
That's
All right, let's wrap it up, man, with another, shout out to our new Patreon page, patreon.com/crushingiron. Anything you guys can do for us and inspire us to keep it, or take it to another level, that'd be awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm pumped for it, man. I'm pumped for it all. I'm just ready. The whole experience has been awesome. So, looking forward to the next step in our journey.
Yeah, me too. Anything else you want to say as we go?
Oh yeah, I got to give I went to coaching full time, so I've kind of opened up my roster back again. I am pretty close to tapped overall. I know I haven't updated and given a shout out to our new athletes in 2 weeks, but we have had a strong influx. When you have an awesome team and great relationship and great results, things happen. So a big shout out to Stephanie Sanders in Indiana, Doug McGrath, Minnesota, Big Ross Kaffenberger, New York, Lance Hostetler, Virginia, Christine Backrack, Maryland, Sarah Frank, Virginia, Dave Mercer, Canada, and Stuart Wood, Sweden.
Man, we're getting around, man. You're getting around.
Was that a good? Sweden. I've got like Uggs on and like Oakleys and poles in my hand. Sweden. I got my hair, but I'm ready to roll.
What a great group, man.
Oh man, we do. I have the greatest job ever. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
and
man.
I'm about to go have my birthday dinner with my family. So.
Oh man, and your birthday isn't today though, right?
No, it's on Saturday. We'll do a big thing on Saturday, and but just gonna go eat with my mom. Always likes to take Allie and Hayden and I out for her birthday, so we're gonna head over to Firebirds, and I'm gonna get a ribeye and a baked potato.
Firebirds, is that in Green Hills?
No, Brentwood. I may as well go.
Firefly.
Firefly is what you're thinking, yeah. If I'm gonna have a ribeye and a tater, maybe I'll just race tomorrow.
Yeah, pre-race.
That's my go-to.
Yeah. Okay. Are you feeling better? You ready to run?
I am.
Okay. Cool. Well, enjoy your dinner. Thanks for making the time on your 3 days before your birthday to record this.
Hey, man. Do what you got to do. Slave to the end.
All right. Patreon.com/crushingiron. We appreciate everything you guys are doing for us.
Yes, we do.
We will talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks. And see you next time.
See ya.